In this lesson, you'll work with the options in the Web category of your project's properties. To begin, open the Joe's Bar Web Application project from your Sample Files folder. And view the properties of the project. To do this, right-click Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer and click Properties from the shortcut menu. Your project's properties appear in the main Visual Studio window. Now click the Web tab on the left. The Web options for your project appear. First, let's look at the Start Action settings. Set the start page of your project to default.aspx. To do this, right-click default.aspx in the Solution Explorer and click Set as Start Page from the shortcut menu. Although the start page has been changed, it isn't immediately reflected in the Web options. Close the Project Properties window by clicking the X next to its tab. And reopen the Project Properties by right-clicking Joe's Bar Web Application in the Solution Explorer and clicking Properties from the shortcut menu. You can now see that default.aspx is the start page. This means that default.aspx will always be opened first when you run your project in debug mode. Now set the start page back to the default by clicking the Current Page option under Start Action. Visual Studio will now display whichever page is currently open whenever you start your project in debug mode. This is the default and is usually the preferred way of working. The other Start Action options are rarely used. Start External Program allows you to start an entirely different program whenever you start debugging. The virtual web server will still start, but no pages will be displayed. Start URL allows you to open an entirely different website when you start debugging. This is sometimes used to test web services. Don't open a page, simply start the virtual web server without taking any other action. Now examine the options in the Servers group. The Servers options control the virtual web server that Visual Studio uses when you debug a project. Use Visual Studio Development Server is selected by default and is always the best choice. In earlier versions of Visual Studio, the Use Local IIS Web Server option would have been the default. There's no reason to use this option anymore. Next, you're going to change the port and virtual path used by the virtual web server. Click Debug, Start Debugging. Now examine the path in the address bar of your web browser. The address is http://localhost:, followed by a random number which indicates the port. Ports can be thought of as channels for web traffic. Some ports are reserved for specific purposes. For example, port 25 is used for email traffic. By default, Visual Studio assigns a random port to the virtual web server. The virtual web server can run more than one web application at the same time by assigning them to different ports. Close your web browser now and return to Visual Studio. Now click the Specific Port option under Servers and enter 9986 into the box. In the Virtual Path box, enter /Joe's Bar /. Now click Debug, Start Debugging. This time, the number after localhost is 9986, the number you entered into the specific port box. This is useful because it means that the virtual web server will always have the same address. Web pages are usually sent through port 80. If you set the specific port option to 80, Visual Studio's virtual web server will be accessible at http://localhost without needing a port number. Also notice that the address now ends with /joesbar/. This is very useful if your application will be hosted in a subfolder of a domain, as it allows you to simulate the live environment. Hosting in a subfolder can cause problems, particularly when working with files. By setting the virtual path option correctly, you will ensure that you catch these problems before publishing your site to the web. Close your web browser now, and close Visual Studio. You've now completed Lesson 1.6, Change Web Options.